Welcome to the Legendarian Green Team, the weird little patron spinoff of the Legendarian podcast. I'm Little Red Book, your host. Today we are introducing our read-through of the Uplift Saga by David Brin. I'm the newbie to the series, but I have two veterans, Eradandis.
Hey there.
And Kyptan.
Heyo.
So David Brin is an award-winning science fiction author. Startide Rising, the first book in the Uplift Saga, won the Locus, the Hugo, and the Nebula for Best Novel in 1984. He also won awards for the Uplift Wars in 1988 and for the Postman in 1986. Humanity has learned how to tweak not only their own genetics, but those of their fellow Earthlings, and are beginning to explore the stars, only to find a universe crowded with sentient life and a complex web of political interplay between client and patron alien species. Humanity is an orphan species, having reached sentience without the obvious patron. Before we get started, I have read Sundiver, the prequel, and Startide Rising. So the first question is, why are we starting with Startide Rising?
Because Sundiver sucks. Just kidding.
It does not suck.
Because Sundiver isn't as good as Startide, and I've been thinking about this a little bit. You remember, I guess it's lore now that Wheel of Time, Die of the World was written with certain public publisher specifications. It had to be written like a Lord of the Rings style book. And until Robert Jordan got his chance, starring Dragon Reborn, to write his own series, it kind of followed a formula. Sundiver follows the old traditional Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein formula. So he's trying to pack all these incredible ideas into a box that really doesn't fit in. And he doesn't get a chance to make that box until Startide Rising. What do you guys think?
I mean,
yeah, exactly. It was very odd. The main character in Sundiver is an odd person and it's very formulaic. It has like a very set story beats. That's the word I'm looking for, like plot points. And it feels like I don't know, it doesn't feel natural. Whereas Startide Rising has a much more natural feel. The voice of the author is much stronger, I think, and it's more enjoyable.
Sundiver is like a paint by numbers detective sci-fi thriller.
Yes.
Like very much in the style of Asimov. I'm reminded specifically of Caves of Steel, where it's like a detective novel with a mystery, and our protagonist is the plucky guy who figures everything out. And except for the like lovely bits of solar physics where you can clearly see Brin's science background coming out and like his love for the internal makeup and like specific bits of like, oh, what would it be like to be inside of the sun and see everything in this spectrum of hydrogen? Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
But and that's like one of the unique things he added. But
yeah,
I would definitely say that his love of science is what attracted me to the books in the first place, because it's so evident how much he loves science and thinking about it, and that attracted me to Sundiver and kind of led me into wanting to read Startide. That plus agreeing with everything you guys said, the one thing that the impression I got out of Sundiver was that it was just bursting at the seams with ideas, and I'm like, where could this go if he was like if he could just get these ideas out? And he did in Startide.
So
yeah,
this might be a little spoilerly, whatever. The idea that there's creatures living in the sun and we're trying to figure that out, I thought that was a really cool concept. That was my favorite part of that and the evil koala bear alien. At least that's how I pictured it, as a koala bear.
Yeah,
I pictured teddy bear, but yeah.
Well, and I would say this too, that like Brin, despite the fact that he is a hard science fiction writer, he really is a literary writer. Like, and you really, really see that when he's let off the chain in subsequent books. And to Kip's earlier point, you can totally tell that he was bound and chained and said, write it this way for Sundiver.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the sheer number of authorial references that he drops in Startide Rising took me back on a reread. I was like, I don't think I caught all of these in my first couple reads through.
No, it's really amazing.
Because I wasn't as well read then.
Well, yeah, or the way he every chapter. I mean, he literally says, okay, if I'm going to have a different viewpoint, I'm going to have a different chapter. He just boom, 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 boom. Just every time. You'd have 3 chapters at the end of the book that are 3 chapters in a page and a half. It was
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's those little flourishes that you're talking about that I don't know, that kind of blew my mind on this reread again.
And it makes it helpful that
Exactly.
when you're reading it.
And
Okay.
he also like really plays with the words on the page and like fonts and italicization.
Yes.
Oh, I missed that because I did not.
Well,
And like bold type and M dashes, and he's really willing to use all the tools in that toolbox.
Huh. Maybe I should
agree.
get
This
the
is
Kindle
definitely a
version.
pre. I was about to say this is definitely a pre-audiobook book because not really spoilers, but like poems play a major part in Startide Rising,
Yes.
and
In all of the Uplift books, really.
Well, and
okay,
that comes
fair.
across in the audiobook for sure. The narrator did a really
Well,
good job with that.
but the way the poems are written on the page like differ. To Kip's earlier point, the way he italicizes the words, sometimes he has some words like superimposed where they're a little bit above the other words or a little bit below the other words. It's a very visual, like if you have the book in your hand, it's a very visual book and a very different experience than just listening to it. At least that's my opinion.
I
Well,
agree.
I guess I'm gonna have to go get a physical copy then. So it's called the
Yeah. There's a separate beauty in like a haiku being recited instead of printed. I will agree that they both have their forms of beauty. Okay, so it's called the Uplift Saga, but it would be equally accurate to call this the Uplift Universe because the world and the galactic civilization that he introduces us to are built on the central tenet of uplift, the process of elder species raising up pre-sentient younger species into the galactic community, all tracing their lineage all the way back to the time of the mythical progenitors who originated out of nothing. And humans are a wolfling species. When they finally discover the Timbrimi and make contact, they're like, wait, we had no idea about any of this uplift business, but we'd already started it ourselves, and humans had uplifted chimpanzees and dolphins and had started on a couple other species as well before contact.
right.
And I think it's important to add scale too, Kip.
Oh, yeah. And the galactic civilization is the 5 galaxies. It's hundreds of thousands of different species all existing in this giant, like not incredibly well organized or run galactic civilization with and like there's galactic institutes, but they're more communal.
They're like the UN.
They're like the UN.
Yes.
They're very much like the UN.
And just as badly run.
Everyone's part of them, but they don't have a ton of power.
That's right.
And they don't do anything particularly well either, I don't think. At
Mm.
least that I mean, some things they do well, but
I
yeah.
mean, the Galactic Institute of Migration keeps a fairly good leash on things. They check in on planets every 100,000 years or so.
It's like 1,000,000,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Every 100 million years, or
Yeah.
depending on where you are in the universe, they check in every a different amount of time. Yeah.
And it's that timeline that I think is important too, because, for example, what Kip was earlier saying, when a species uplifts another species, in other words, gives them sentience, gives them the tools that they can use and everything to be members of the civilization, they're required to be indentured for 100,000 years as basically servants to the species that lifted them up. And
Yeah.
humanity has spent, maybe a couple hundred years uplifting the chimpanzees and the dolphins. So the dolphins and chimpanzees aren't nearly as evolved as these other plant species. And part of what, at least to me, and I assume you guys as well, makes this really interesting is that humanity has never been exposed to the galactic civilization. So we went through the School of Hard Knocks. This is a post-racism,
Cleaning up our environment.
Exactly, like where
Yeah.
it's a very optimistic version of the human race, and it's like, yeah, why wouldn't we be treating our uplifted our clients as equals? They're equals, and
not like fully post scarcity, but getting there.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And the galactic civilizations are like, nah. The clan species it's a very fossilized society, and it's that tension between humanity and their view of what uplift should be, and galactic civilization and what their view of uplift should be.
Right.
And it's not, and it reads much cooler than how I'm explaining it.
And one of the like only things that stopped humanity from getting snapped up as like a so-called pre-sentient species is the fact that they'd already started uplifting two other species,
Yeah.
which makes them patrons. It makes them like already have this higher class distinction, and it stopped the discoverer or whoever could lay claim to humanity from doing so.
So, something that legitimately bothers me about this whole uplift process is, you know, we're talking about mucking around with genetics of species that really can't give consent to it. And I mean, how do you think the series deals with that?
Well, Kip, you want to go first?
Well, I would say that the series both makes clear that humans try to get as much consent as possible from the species that they're uplifting, but also that they're fully aware that they can never get such consent from species that doesn't have like conscious ability.
Right.
Right.
Like you
And
can never get fully informed consent for uplift. That's impossible.
right. And the author, there's actually the author, he's very careful about the way he explains these species. There's sentience, in other words, the ability to know yourself, sapience, which is then the ability to plan, and then there's sophons, like this advanced ability to be a part of of civilization. So he's very careful about using that terminology in the context of uplift.
Yeah. He creates these classifications of intelligence and consciousness and uses those to help both the reader understand things, but also to help the people in universe like talk about the business of genetically manipulating people for either their own gain. Like at one point in one of the books, a species contemplates genetic meddling in an already established patron race to remove an unpleasant smell from their fur,
Yep.
just like for their own personal convenience.
And shedding too, to
And shedding,
eliminate.
and they shed too much. Yeah.
But Red, to your point, what you'll see with the client, with humanity's client species, so the dolphins and the chimpanzees, and then later there's other species. They go through this thought process of, wow, the humans did this to us. Do I really like the idea that I'm eventually going to have hands, or that I've lost the ability to think like the pre-sentient dolphins used to think? So they go through that process, and he makes a point that different dolphins or different chimpanzees come to different conclusions throughout the series.
Yes.
So it's not a uniform, yay, this is great. It is, well, I kind of like this, or I like this part, I don't like that part. And he does a job of actually, like, at least putting out those
Exploring.
different viewpoints.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And also, like, some of them have the thought of, are they truly uplifting us? Are they like making us better versions of ourselves? Or are they making us into something of use to the patron race?
Right.
Or just a copy of the patron race?
Right.
Here, that's Kip touched on, I think, a core point there, because one of the thought processes that the client species end up having is, at least humanity's client species, are they making us more human? And do we want to be more human?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is why I love several of the examples in Startide Rising who are not human, and it's some of the best parts about them.
Right.
Right. Or some of the antagonists are the most human in the book.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So, how many alien species are we talking about exactly?
Ooh, I can try to answer this, even though Kip touched on it. So by count in the entire series, I think there's about 100 different species that are at least mentioned by name, but that only includes like the galaxy. There's 5 galaxies. There's extinct species. There's species that have gone back into pre-sentient states. So we're looking at what Kip earlier said, hundreds of thousands of species. And real estate is scarce as a result. And that's where a lot of the fight is about, is who gets to control what world and who gets what species. Kip?
I'm really looking forward to getting further into the series because, like, it's just so full of life.
The imagination that Brin brings to his numbers and like diversity of alien species is mind-blowing. And he ties it so well with the central theme of uplift, because this is a universe in which nothing had to naturally evolve. Almost every species in the galaxy is a product of intelligent design, proven intelligent design mixed with natural evolution.
Right.
And
Yes.
the variety and the uniqueness that you can get out of a situation like that allows you to suspend disbelief and have just the craziest aliens. Just things that could never naturally evolve in nature are used as examples of how the universe could be so wild and imaginative. I love it.
Didn't you say there was a alien species with wheels
With
or something?
Yes,
wheels.
but
With
no
wheels.
spoilers. No spoilers. Yes.
I
But
don't think
then
that's a spoiler.
But then it's also used to be like, okay, how much of an invasion of autonomy and personality and everything, how much of an intrusion of really just an abomination that people have had the audacity and arrogance to do this to another living race.
Right. That was, again, that's something that,
What did the in-between states look? What did the experimentations look like? How could this have been done ethically? It can't.
yeah, that is something that, like I said, really struck me, especially with Startide Rising, but also just in Sundiver. Like, there's just things that are going on, and you're like, this is bad. This is
Yep.
almost evil.
Well,
Yep.
well, I'm going to bring it down to like I guess a level 1 level here for a second. These aliens are cool, man. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
they're so cool. They're so cool.
Yeah, I mean, Brin is just like if you just pick up Star Trek Rising and read it, I mean, the book is practically trembling with the energy of his ideas. It's just an explosion of ideas just on every page. I mean, you're talking about aliens. The only thing he limited himself with respect to the aliens that we're going to talk about at the beginning of the series is that they have to breathe oxygen. That's
Right.
it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's it.
they could be walking, they could be sentient trees, they could be fungus, it could be a praying mantis, it could be a teddy bear. I mean, it doesn't matter. And
The
he
Pilas are
just lets
totally koala bears.
and his imagination runs wild.
One minor point. Do we count things that breathe oxygen for half of their life cycle? Because I'm not clear, it's not entirely clear that oh God, I'm going to do this.
Don't. So let's save that one. I know you're going to say, please save it.
Yeah, I know what you are. Please save it. Unless you aren't going to be able to say it.
The species with a double glottal stop.
That's like seriously the name of
That
the
species breathes oxygen for the rest of their life.
Well, and we're all making jokes about this, but like some of this, again, you have to be able to read, like see the words on the page. He will have a species name that'll be J, the number 8, ST apostrophe L, like, and then ampersand, whatever, right?
Yep.
I mean, his imagination is just, he basically says, look, anything I can possibly think of, that's what you can expect out there in the universe. And the only thing tying all these different beings together is the library. It's this font of information that kind of holds all these species together.
The repository to end all repositories.
Right. So that gets into one of my other questions. So one of the things that they're really doing in Sundiver is humanity is trying to gain access to the library and to the knowledge in the library. But at the same time, they're very suspicious of the knowledge that is in the library. They're also very suspicious of alien technology. So how does that play out throughout the series?
Very
Like they
well.
want access to it, but they also are suspicious.
Well, if we take the galactic civilization's knowledge, it's found in the library, the galactic library, and just consider it from the viewpoints of the galactic civilization. Anything that could have been discovered has already been discovered and can be found in the library. There's no reason to go create something new because there's nothing new under the sun. You can find everything in the galactic library. And humanity's like, don't know if that's true, really. And we want to figure stuff out on our own. I say we, being human. And so they kind of, A, take a skeptical look at it. And then B, when they receive this information, they're not sure they're getting A, accurate information, B, complete information, or C, whether it's just like a series of misinformations where they're being given just enough to hang themselves with. So humanity is constantly suspicious of galactic civilization because galactic civilization does not consider humanity to necessarily be a worthy patron species. So there's this tension that's always going on where you have humanity who grew up on our own, so we try to figure stuff out on our own, so we've developed tools to figure things out. And on the other side, you have galactic civilization, which is old and ancient and has everything under the sun, and they don't try to figure things out. They just go to the library to find everything.
Yeah. And there's a like internal debate on Earth versus people who are like, okay, we can do this, we can learn these things, we can look at the library and then run our own experiments and tests to advance human science faster, but still continue human science. And then there's the group that's just like, why don't we just do what everyone else does and just copy? It's so much easier.
And it's a theme. It really is a theme. It's one of the underlying current, at least to me, one of the themes of the book is it's the positivist view of science, of like you can figure things out and find things out and make the universe a better place. Just don't fall into the trap of just accepting things for the way they are. That runs throughout, at least to me, it runs throughout the whole series, is that there's that tension between you have basically everybody who's on humanity's side who basically asks the question, why? Why are things the way they are? Why don't we try something different? Versus the other side of, we figured everything out. There's nothing left to discover. We're going to do things the traditional way. There's no reason to ask the why.
Or
Yep.
the should.
Or the should.
Yeah, that was something that I really noticed is like, we're doing it this way, but should we actually be doing it this way? Like, is this a good or ethical way to do things? Or what's being missed by just being the receiver of knowledge? Plus, there's a tension with kind of a poison pill. Like
Mm.
you said,
Yeah.
they're giving us just enough knowledge so that we can hang ourselves, or they're giving us incorrect knowledge to hang on to power.
Or as long as we stay beholden to their library system, we will be within their system, and there's no way that we would be able to break out of it.
Yeah.
Right. And it ends up both hurting and helping humanity because everybody on humanity's side have the tools to figure things out. And on the galactic civilization side, by and large, they do not. And that comes back to both help and hurt humanity in various ways throughout the series.
Yeah, they don't understand.
Definitely doesn't help humanity fit in.
Yeah, there's
Correct.
a element where they don't understand how their own technology works.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that really comes out strongly in both Sundiver and Startide Rising.
Oh, it continues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it does. It's an
And
interesting
I'll say this,
question.
yeah, and there's no unanimity of views on either side because you'll have on humanity's side, hey, why don't we just, like to Kip's and Red's earlier point, why don't we take all this technology and just use it? And then you have people on the galactic side saying, hey, these Earthlings have a point. Like, let's try to figure stuff out. And Brin does make a point of eliciting those different viewpoints without ever
Right.
taking a side.
Right.
One of humanity's closest allies is the Timbrimi. They're the people who they eventually found and made first contact with humanity. And it just so happens that they are a very friendly and, by galactic standards, kind of odd species. They're the tricksters of the galaxy. And even they, because they were brought up through the system of Uplift, through galactic society, they're still so locked into traditional ways of thinking that even though they're the galactic oddballs, they're still nothing like humanity and their wolfling approaches to the world.
Okay. So this is something that the whole time I was reading the first book, I kept thinking, are there any just normal chimps and dolphins hanging out? Like ones that we haven't messed with that are just part of naturally evolved species?
So they mentioned this in Startide, and yes, there are fallow populations of chimpanzees and dolphins unadjusted that they keep as basically control samples for Uplift.
Right. And
That's
remember
cool.
that humanity is very early in the process of Uplift. So
Yeah.
they definitely have control populations. And it actually becomes a major theme in the Uplift War, but it's certainly at least touched on in Startide that humanity does control who among their clients gets to procreate. And they have the right to continue to performing genetic experiments, which is a huge issue in the first two books for sure. So
Right.
Yeah.
It's something that I found, again, questionably, ethically questionable
And
behavior that's going on.
there's kind of a feeling in the series that like Although the Galactic Society is very concerned with being ecologically responsible managers of planets and the five galaxies,
Right.
humanity has had their most recent experience with the near destruction of their own planet and themselves. And they just barely got through some pretty troubling times with ecological devastation. And everyone on Earth remembers that and is taught that and lives those ideals of environmentalism and ecology. And they do it in a way that's more personal and more directly tied to their species and cultural identity than any of the galactics. Because the galactics are well, okay, they messed up a world and that's a bad mark on them, but it means we'll just, decrease their world loan credit or something. One planet doesn't mean as much to them. And whereas on Earth and with humans,
That's all we had.
that's all we had. That's all we had to take care of. And so taking care of the planet is something that Earthlings recently got very good at and are now better at than the majority of galactic civilization. Because the galactics are just let's wait 100,000 years. The planet will fix itself.
That's actually a point that does recur throughout the series, because the galactic civilization basically gives Earthlings the crap worlds.
Yeah.
Here, go figure it out. And then the Earthlings do. Because for everything Kip earlier said, in the first book, it's not really touched on that much. But humanity's government, they don't really discuss it that much, but it doesn't necessarily sound like it's a world of fun, but it's what they have to do to survive. It definitely seems more authoritarian than one would expect. But at least in the first two books, it doesn't seem to play a major part. So
No.
I'll just point that out.
Actual Earth itself is touched on in Sundiver and then not really brought up too much in the rest of the books. All the rest of the books take place elsewhere. And you might have flashbacks to Earth or flashbacks to Venus. But in general, everything's in this wild and crazy galactic universe.
Right. Well, one of the things I found interesting about Sundiver is they're don't tell the aliens that we killed off the manatees, and don't tell the aliens that we killed off all these different species, because then they won't give us a library.
Yeah.
And that's a really strong recurring theme. They're we're fixing it now, but we have all these horrible sins, and none of the other alien species have those sins in their background because they all went through the uplift process. So they never
yeah.
made those mistakes, whereas we made a whole.
Not none, but very few.
Right, exactly.
Because the galaxy is huge and everyone has possibilities, and the library contains examples of everything.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And these alien species, I think Brin also does a good job both through the way he writes, what we talked about earlier, basically sometimes he italicizes, sometimes he uses bigger fonts or whatever when these aliens are talking. He also does, I think, a very good job of showing these aliens as alien.
Right.
They just don't process things the way humans do. And the way humans act, he'll present the human's point of view and it makes sense to us, right? How we're acting is alien to the alien.
Right.
And I think that's a powerful symbol to kind of show how you can act in a way that makes complete sense to you and is completely alien to somebody else.
And I actually thought that was something he did really well. Is when you were in a different species head, you really felt like you were in a different species head. It didn't, you know what I mean?
Yes.
He did a really good job defining the different, even between the dolphins and the chimps and stuff, you could tell which species head you were in by the way the character acted and thought. And
Yep.
I thought that was just brilliant. It was so well done. So we've been talking all about all these really heavy subjects. Why should you read this book if you don't want to get into a big ethical thought process? You just want to have fun.
Because it's fun and there's space battles and things go boom and you got, excuse my language, you got bad people doing bad things. I mean, look,
oh my God, Tom Orley action hero, seriously.
It's really seriously. Look, I read this book when I was a very young teenager, and I didn't get any of this other stuff. All I saw was that there was some cool fight scenes. There's this dolphin who, he ends up fighting, he gets into all these fights and he's a smart ass, and I loved him. And the humans are awesome, and they trick all the bad guy aliens, and there's lots of space battles, and Look, I just fell in love with the book the first time around just because of all the punching. 100%. That's the only thing I cared
And
about. So.
mysteries.
Yes.
Yes.
It's like, I want to read what happens. I want to find out what happens.
And even though
Yes.
Sundiver isn't as good as Startide Rising, I really enjoyed it. It's not perfect. It has issues, but yeah, you wanted to find out what happened and why people are doing what they're
Yeah.
doing, and there's twists and turns, and then they're falling through the sun.
And what is this parlor scene you speak about, Jacob
Oh,
Denma?
Jesus. I'm sorry. I was so annoyed when they actually called it a parlor scene. I was like, really?
And
Yeah.
I think the other thing I'll add too is I've always been a fan of writing and how words look on the page and how things are communicated. And little barely a teenager me, when I read it, I'm like, wait, you can write like a science fiction book and have like haikus in the middle of it, and that's going to be the way you're going to communicate. And it's not boring. This is actually like fun and cool and interesting. Wow, my mind was completely blown. It was completely blown when I read it the first time.
They're beautiful books.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I guess I'm gonna have to go down to Powell's and pick myself up some physical copies. Not that it's ever bad to go to Powell's. It's always good. So how would you rate the series overall?
Ooh,
Kip, I'll let you go first.
These are 5s. Sundiver notwithstanding, these are 5s.
I would say I'm maybe not quite as strong as Kip on it. I think the first 2, like outside Sundiver, Startide Rising, and Uplift War, are among 2 of the best books you'll ever pick up and read. If you just like science fiction books, these are awesome books. I'm not as big a fan of the Uplift Storm, but I do like the Uplift Storm. And if there's any quibbles I have about the Uplift Storm, it's more because David Brin is a person who is completely fearless in his imagination and willingness to put down 100 ideas onto a page and see what sticks. And it didn't stick for me quite as well in Uplift Storm, but still, they're really, really good books, and I really enjoyed them.
Uplift Storm is the upper limit of how many plot threads I'm okay leaving dangling at the end of a series. But I love it. Oh my God, I love it.
Oh.
Because it's fueled so much imagination in the years since I've read it, wondering, okay, what happened to this thread? Like, what do I think as a reader, given the clues in the book, do I think happened in this thread?
And I guess for everybody, Uplift Storm would be the 3 books after Startide Rising and the Uplift War. That would be the trilogy of Brightness Reef, Infinity Shore, and Heaven's Reach. So when we say Uplift Storm, that's what we're talking about. And I agree with everything Kip just said.
Well, like I said, I really enjoyed the first book. I'd give it probably a 3.5. It was fun to read, but it wasn't super standout. And we'll talk more about this because we're actually going to do a Startide Rising episode. But I mean, I was blown away at how much David Brin had grown as an author and just how imaginative it was. And it was fun, and you could think about the serious stuff, but it was just so much fun to read. I mean, you have explosives and punching.
Sundiver felt like it was written 10 years or 20 years prior to when it actually was.
Yes.
Whereas Startide Rising, the Uplift War, and everything afterward could have been written today and would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think so. I agree.
Well, and I'll say this. I mean, people probably don't realize how much David Brin's Uplift series has influenced science fiction through till today. I mean, I really don't think people realize this. Anytime you see a dolphin on a page or in a TV show or in a movie flying a plane or flying a spaceship, thank you, David Brin. I mean, it's his influence really is permeated into science fiction in ways that we don't even think about anymore. And that's probably, to me, the biggest testament we can say to him.
I just kept thinking about Flipper. I don't know if you guys ever watched Flipper.
They mention Flipper in the book.
I think they do.
They do.
Shout out.
So is there anything else you guys want to add? Like, I feel like we've covered this series pretty thoroughly. I don't have any more questions, I don't think.
I would say to anybody who likes science or who just likes a good story, pick this book up. Pick up Startide Rising and just give it a try. You can pick it up and not go any further in the series and be completely satisfied, though there'll be some hanging issues, but you can completely read it and enjoy it. So I'd say go pick it up if you are looking for something to read.
You can pick up Startide Rising, and just with that one book, you will be inducted into the fraternity of people who can have a debate about the ending forever. Because I just found out the other day that Era and I disagree about what happens at the ending of the book.
Yes,
Oh,
we do.
okay. Well, that'll be fun to talk about when we do that book.
Yeah.
And to be clear, I don't think we can
And there's
talk about
not.
endlessly.
I don't think that we can say that either of us is right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, when I do my reread, I will think about that as I'm doing it. I just want to say you can read the first book if you want. It's a fine book. It's fine. It's fine. But the second book, Startide Rising, is a lot of fun. And I'm really looking forward to talking about it. And you can also read it and feel like you don't have to read further. You have a feeling of a complete story in that one book. So you're not committing yourself to a bazillion other books, like when you're reading Cosmere or something like that.
I think if you're going to read these books, pick up Startide Rising or The Uplift War or Brightness Reef. Don't pick up Sundiver to start. It's not necessary, and it's inferior. If you want, you can read Sundiver at the end.
You can read Startide Rising or the Uplift War in any order. In the universe, they happen concurrently. So you can read one and not be spoiled at all about the other whatsoever. Both books won Hugo and Nebula awards, so they're both considered like the gold standard of their day. So there's no drop off in quality. Read either one as a standalone. You'll enjoy it. You can read them both and enjoy it. Or you can just go right into Brightness Reef and read that trilogy. So yeah. So there's a lot of entry points to the series, and you don't even have to touch Sundiver.
Okay. So I think that's everything else. Is that anybody have anything else to add, or are we going to wrap it up?
I'm excited to be reading the series with y'all.
I'm so excited. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so thanks for listening to our little discussion of this great big world. I hope you'll join us in our jaunt through the Uplift saga. Thank you, Kip and Era, for going on this journey with me. Join us on the Legendarium subreddit, the Legendarium Discord, and consider supporting the Legendarium on Patreon. Thanks, Craig, for loaning us this little corner of your media empire, and thank you, Horizon Brave, for starting it all. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.